Before we begin tonight's story, I would just like to issue a quick trigger warning that this story does have implied violence against animals. So if that is something that you are not willing or able to handle, this is not the story for you. Thank you for tuning in, and please join us next week. Lost Cat, written by Duketuring, narrated by Remy Militello. Before I begin, I just would like to say thank you to this author for letting me read this. It's a deeply personal story to him, and I very much appreciate him allowing me to try and do it justice. If you enjoy this story, check out more of his work at the subreddit Duketuring, and I will post a link to both his subreddit and the original story in the description. Without further ado, let's begin Lost Cat. A couple of weeks ago, I googled the statistics for lost cats. They were good. 60 to 80% make it home safe. Kit was fast, healthy, and chipped. His chances were good. My partners and I spent days and hundreds of dollars on flyers, digital campaigns, and door-to-door walks through the city with stacks of handbills. By the time we were done, I would be surprised if there was a single soul in our town that wasn't aware of our poor lost Kit. As each day passed, the flickering light of hope I carried grew a little fainter. The nights were getting cold, with a thick, hoary frost appearing every morning. There were reports of coyotes in the neighborhood. I frequently broke down sobbing, thinking about my poor little baby, injured and hiding, starving and shivering under a bush. He was always a bit of an ass, especially to me, his technical owner. He had a soft spot for Ivan, but other than that, he only did things his way and was generally aloof. Bedtime was one of the major exceptions. He liked sleeping with me, and when he decided the day had gone on long enough, he would follow me around the house, meowing forcefully until I followed him to slumber. That meow, so high-pitched for such a big cat. I still remember when we got him 12 years ago. He was a scrawny little thing, all ears. We thought he was the runt of the litter. Boy, were we wrong. But while he grew into his ears, his meow never grew with him. I could hear the same meow in the background of the call that finally came 3 restless weeks later. Yeah, I just found him in my backyard. I lured him in with some treats and remembered the flyer I saw at the grocery store. Part of me could tell something was off. There was a strangeness to the meows I couldn't put my finger on. But that part of me was pushed aside by the joy of being reunited with my baby. The man described him perfectly, right down to little details you couldn't get from the flyer. I was ecstatic. My partners and I quickly alternated between sobbing and hugging and getting dressed to go pick up Kit at the address the man had given us. We drove slowly through the subdivision, not far from our home, but still unfamiliar territory. That's when the car headlights caught those familiar, reflective, golden green orbs. Confused, we immediately parked the car and got out. Sure enough, there he was, tail upright and erect with happiness at our reunion, purring loudly. But instead of running up to us, he meowed a few more times, then turned and ran into the brush. Classic Kit, who always said he was a complete asshole, but only got away with it because he was cute. The 3 of us followed him, Kit occasionally stopping to make sure we were close behind. We must have walked 2 miles, along sidewalks, through backyards, cutting across parks. Finally, we parted a stand of bamboo and saw him standing there on a small rock in the familiar, "you may pet me now" position. I rushed forward, but Ivan and Dave both held me back and advised not spooking Kit. Just then the phone rang. I felt awful. We should have let the guy know Kit had escaped and we were following him right from the start. I handed Dave the phone as I went to embrace Kit again. Slowly, ever so slowly, I crept towards Kit. His purr got louder, and he closed his eyes in a sign of trust and affection. Confused, I heard Dave's half of the conversation in the background. "So sorry, we're just running a bit late. We'll be there soon." Kit tilted his head, his way of asking for chin scratches, and I swear to you, I'll swear to anything you want, for the briefest moment I felt his warm, soft fur on my fingers, and just like that, he was gone. Dave was hanging up the phone. I finally looked up to see where Kit's Mary Chase had taken us, the local police station. There was a silent debate between us as we all exchanged glances, unable to process what had just happened. Finally, Dave spoke up. "He was asking where we were. He said Kit was waiting for us, and I heard the same meows in the background." Ivan, who had been quietly crying, gathered himself. "We all saw him, right? Heard him? That wasn't some optical illusion or hallucination. He led us here." After working out a more believable story about an anonymous tip from a neighbor that had seen the man living at the address killing our cat, we walked into the police station and filed a report. We loitered just outside the police perimeter. The single squad car quickly multiplied until it seemed every cop in the state had descended on the man's house. He was led out in handcuffs, and everything was taped off. Sometime later, the body bags came out, large and small. As it turns out, were not to be his first and only victims. He had been capturing local pets, killing them, giving the owners a few weeks for desperation to set in, then luring the owners to his home for the same gruesome fate. We retained the rights to the remains of poor Kit and opted to have him cremated. Ivan mixed his ashes into paint and made a portrait that we hung over his favorite napping spot. After the trial, at my request, they provided us with a cassette of Kit's meows that the killer used to lure us into his trap. I bought a cassette player at a thrift store, and some nights when I miss him dearly, I listen to that tape. I listen to the tape. Those meows, while scared and confused, were free of suffering. He was just hungry and missed his daddy. And his daddy misses him still. The end. Once again, I want to thank Duketuring for allowing me to read this very personal story of his. And I encourage you to check out more of his work at his subreddit, Duketuring, and I will post a link to both that and the original story. Thank you so much for joining me. Stay safe and stay spooky.